Ethan had always felt different, not in the way that made someone special, but in the way that made someone alone. Since childhood, he had sensed things, subtle shifts in the air, whispers in places where no one stood, an invisible presence guiding his steps. His mother called an overactive imagination. His teachers labeled him distracted. But Ethan knew it was something more. It started with the dreams. They weren't nightmares, but they left him shaken nonetheless. A symbol, curved lines intersecting at impossible angles, burned itself into his mind. He would wake up drenched in sweat, his heart hammering, the symbol lingering behind his eyelids. Then there were the moments of impossible luck. A near-car accident at 7 years old. The driver swerved at the last second, as if some unseen force had pushed the vehicle away. A fire in his childhood home. His room was untouched while the rest of the house was gutted. Even small things, like objects appearing in his hand before he reached for them, made him question reality. But the strangest moment of all came when he was 10 years old. It was a school field trip to a cathedral, one of the oldest in the city. The air was thick with incense, the walls lined with paintings of saints and martyrs. Ethan had wandered away from the group, drawn by something he couldn't name. That's when he saw the painting. It was old, its colors faded, but the face was unmistakable. It was him. The same eyes, the same sharp features, staring back at him from centuries ago. Underneath the figure, written in Latin, were the words, marked from birth, chosen by the unseen. His skin went cold. His breath came in short gasps. And then, "Do you know what you are?" A voice, deep and knowing, whispered in his ear. Ethan turned. No one was there. That night, he dreamed of the symbol again. But this time, when he woke up, it wasn't just in his mind. It was on his skin. Present day, a forgotten past resurfaces. Ethan had spent 20 years trying to forget that moment. He told himself it was a trick of the mind, a coincidence. But no matter how much he ignored it, the feeling never left. Then the letter arrived. No return address. No name. Just a single sentence written in perfect, elegant handwriting. "It's time you learn the truth." Inside was an address and a date. Tonight, something in his gut told him to ignore it. But something deeper, older, told him he didn't have a choice. The meeting, Dr. Callahan's warning. The address led to an old bookstore in a forgotten part of the city. Dust clung to the shelves, the air thick with the scent of aged paper. At the back of the store, behind a door marked private, an old man sat at a desk, flipping through a worn leather journal. His eyes lifted the moment Ethan stepped in. "You came," the man said. His voice was calm, but there was something heavy behind it, something that told Ethan this was not an ordinary meeting. "Who are you?" Ethan asked. "Dr. Callahan," the man replied. "And I know what you've been seeing. The symbol, the dreams, the impossible moments. They're not accidents, Ethan. They're signs." Ethan stiffened. "Signs of what?" Callahan leaned forward. "That you are one of the marked." For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Marked." Ethan repeated, his throat dry. Callahan nodded. "There have always been a few, born with an invisible mark, chosen for something greater. Some call it destiny. Others call it a curse. But those who bear it are never truly free." Ethan swallowed. "Chosen for what?" The old man sighed, closing the journal. "That depends. Some were meant to change the world. Others were meant to destroy it." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. "And which one am I?" Callahan didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled something from his desk, a photograph. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The image showed a group of people standing in front of a monastery. Their faces were blurred, except for one. It was him, not someone who looked like him, not an ancestor. Him, same age, same expression, standing in a photograph that looked over 100 years old. His fingers trembled as he held it. This is impossible." "No, Ethan," Callahan said softly. "This is just the beginning." Ethan's mind reeled, his heartbeat hammering. But before he could respond, a sudden, sharp bang echoed through the bookstore. Someone was trying to break in. Callahan's face darkened. "They found us." Ethan barely had time to react before the lights flickered, and the entire world went dark. Darkness swallowed the bookstore. The only sound was Ethan's ragged breathing and the distant creak of the front door being forced open. A sharp whisper cut through the silence. "Move." Callahan grabbed Ethan's wrist and yanked him toward the back of the room. They stumbled through a narrow hallway cluttered with old books and forgotten relics. Ethan's mind raced, his grip tightening around the photograph still clutched in his hand. The door behind them burst open. Shadows flooded in, their figures distorted against the dim emergency light that flickered above. "Run." Callahan shoved Ethan forward just as the first shot rang out. A bullet slammed into the wooden bookshelf beside them, sending splinters flying. Ethan ducked, his pulse roaring in his ears. He had no idea who these people were, but one thing was clear. They wanted him dead. They crashed through a hidden door at the end of the hall, emerging into the cold night air of an alleyway. Callahan didn't stop. He yanked Ethan down a maze of back streets, their footsteps echoing against the damp pavement. "Who are they?" Ethan gasped, struggling to keep up. Callahan didn't answer. His focus was on the streets ahead, his movements sharp, precise, like he had done this before. A sudden, gut-wrenching screech filled the air. Ethan turned just in time to see a black van speeding toward them. Its headlights flared, and before he could react, bang! The glass of a nearby shop shattered as Callahan fired a pistol Ethan hadn't even seen him pull. The van skidded, tires screeching, before swerving onto another street. Callahan grabbed Ethan's shoulder. "We don't have much time. We need to get underground." Ethan barely had time to register the words before Callahan was dragging him toward a rusted metal grate. With a grunt, he pried it open, revealing a ladder leading into a pitch-black tunnel. Callahan climbed down first. Ethan hesitated only for a second before following. The moment his feet touched the ground, Callahan sealed the entrance above them. They were in complete darkness. A dim red glow flickered ahead as Callahan pulled out a lighter, revealing a damp, ancient tunnel. The walls were lined with carvings, symbols that looked eerily similar to the one Ethan had seen in his dreams. A cold shiver crawled up his spine. "Where are we?" Callahan exhaled slowly. A sanctuary. One of the last places they haven't found. Ethan's heart pounded. "Who are they?" Callahan hesitated, then muttered, "The Order of the Veil." The name meant nothing to Ethan, but the fear in Callahan's voice did. They've been hunting the marked ones for centuries. Ethan swallowed hard. "Hunting? Why?" Callahan met his gaze. "Because we are proof that the past isn't just a past." A sharp sound echoed through the tunnels. Footsteps. Ethan spun, his pulse hammering. Someone else was here. A silhouette stepped out of the shadows. A woman, her eyes locked onto Ethan, filled with an intensity that made his breath hitch. She knew him. "You should have run when you had the chance." Callahan tensed. Sophia. The name sent a jolt through Ethan's body. He knew that name. He had never met this woman before, and yet something deep inside him remembered her. She was from his dreams. Sophia exhaled. "They know who you are now, Ethan, and they won't stop until they have you." Ethan's stomach turned. "Why? What do they want from me?" Sophia hesitated. Then, in a low voice, she said, "Because you are the last piece of the puzzle." Ethan's mind reeled. "What puzzle?" Sophia's gaze darkened. "The one that ends a world." A deep rumbling shook the tunnels. Dust fell from the ceiling. Callahan swore. "They found us." Sophia turned to Ethan. "You have a choice. Come with us or die here." Ethan barely had time to think before the tunnels erupted into chaos. The tunnel walls shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling, and a deep, guttural rumbling echoed to the underground passage. Ethan's breath hitched as the air grew thick with the scent of damp stone and something else. Something ancient. Sophia's piercing gaze locked onto his. "Ethan, choose. Now." Callahan gritted his teeth, pulling out a weapon from inside his coat, a sleek, black pistol with symbols carved along its barrel. "They're breaching the tunnels. We have seconds before we're trapped." Ethan's mind spun. Just moments ago, he had been in a dusty bookstore, searching for fragments of a past he barely understood. Now he was underground, being hunted by an organization he had never heard of, standing before a woman who felt like a memory he couldn't place. Then the whispers began. Low, unearthly voices crawled along the walls, slithering through the air like serpents. Ethan wasn't just hearing them. He was feeling them. They pressed against his skin, humming through his bones, vibrating in his skull. "He's awakening," Sophia murmured, stepping closer, her voice laced with both awe and fear. Ethan staggered, gripping his temples as the whispers turned into words. Words in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. "The Marked One has returned." Callahan cursed. "We need to go. Now." But Ethan couldn't move. His veins burned as a flood of memories that weren't his, exploded in his mind. Visions flashed like a storm. A temple hidden beneath the sea, where robed figures chanted before an altar. A massacre in a grand hall, where warriors fell, their blood painting symbols on the floor. A key, shaped like an eye, being locked away in a vault older than history itself. A name whispered through time, his name. Ethan gasped, his knees buckling. Sophia caught him before he collapsed completely. "You're remembering, aren't you?" He looked up at her, his pulse erratic. This isn't the first time I've lived this." Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. "No." Before he could respond, a deafening crash sent shock waves through the tunnel. The entrance they had come through was now a gaping hole of darkness. Figures moved in the shadows beyond it, silent, precise, unnatural. Callahan aimed his gun. "Go left. The old crypt leads to safe house." Too late. The figures rushed forward with inhuman speed, their movements too fluid, too perfect. The first one leaped, its golden mask catching the dim light. Callahan fired. The bullet hit its mark, but the masked figure didn't stop. It jerked, twitched, and then kept coming. "They're not human!" Ethan shouted. Sophia grabbed his wrist. "Run!" They bolted to the tunnel, the masked ones following, their movements eerily synchronized. Ethan's heartbeat pounded in his ears as he sprinted, feeling the cold air shift around him. The walls were changing. The tunnel was no longer a simple underground passage. It was alive. The carvings on the walls glowed faintly, shifting and pulsing, as if responding to their presence. Ethan felt something pulling at him, an invisible force guiding him deeper into the darkness. Then the tunnel ended. They skidded to a halt before a massive stone door, carved with symbols identical to the ones in Ethan's dreams. A lock was embedded at its center. Sophia's breath hitched. The eye. Ethan barely had time to process what she meant before Callahan shouted, "They're here!" The masked figures closed in, their movements impossibly smooth, their eyes hidden behind their golden masks. One of them raised its hand, and Ethan saw what it held. A dagger he had seen before. Not in reality, not in any history book, in his dreams. The realization struck like lightning. He had lived this before. He had stood here, in this exact place, in another time, another life, and he had failed. The masked figure lunged. The dagger gleamed as it aimed straight for his heart. Time slowed. A burning sensation exploded in Ethan's chest. His vision blurred, the tunnel around him distorting. The symbols on the stone door flared to life, glowing with an intense golden light. And then the door opened. A blast of ancient energy erupted from within, sending shock waves through the tunnel. The masked figures screamed, their bodies disintegrating into dust as the golden light engulfed them. Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping. The whispers returned, louder this time. "Welcome back, Mark I." Sophia and Callahan stood frozen, staring into the chamber beyond the door. Ethan slowly lifted his gaze, and for the first time, he saw it, the artifact, the thing they had been searching for, the thing the Order of the Veil had been killing for. A golden orb, hovering in the air, pulsing with an otherworldly glow. The moment he saw it, he knew this was only the beginning. The golden orb pulsed, filling the chamber with a rhythmic hum, like a heartbeat. Ethan felt it in his bones, in his mind, a force calling to him. It wasn't just an object. It was alive. Sophia stepped closer, her face pale. This isn't supposed to be here. Callahan aimed his gun at the entrance. The tunnel behind them was silent now, but Ethan knew better. The masked figures were gone, yet something worse was coming. He could feel it. Ethan took a step forward, his gaze locked on the orb. The moment his foot touched the ancient stone floor inside the chamber, the entire room shifted. A voice, deep, ageless. You have returned. The symbols on the walls flared brighter. The air became thick, pressing against him like an invisible tide. Sophia stumbled back, eyes wide with terror. Ethan, don't move. But he couldn't stop. The memories crashed over him. He had been here before. He had stood in this exact spot. Another life, another time. And he had made a choice, the wrong choice. The orb pulsed faster, responding to him. Callahan cursed under his breath. We need to leave. Now. Ethan turned to them, his mind racing. If they left, the cycle would repeat. He would forget again. The world would forget again. And in another lifetime, he would find himself right back here. He had to break the pattern. He had to remember everything. Ethan reached out. The instant his fingertips brushed the golden surface, the chamber exploded with light. His body was yanked backward, but not physically. His mind, his soul, they were pulled into the light, into time itself. And he saw everything. A civilization lost to history, buried beneath the ocean before the first pyramids were built. A war between two ancient orders, fighting over a power neither could truly control. The orb wasn't a weapon. It was a lock, a key, a prison. For something that was never meant to wake up. Ethan gasped, ripping himself back into reality. His body convulsed as the chamber around him trembled. The light from the orb dimmed, but the walls, they were moving now. Something was waking up. Sophia grabbed his arm. What did you do? The tunnel behind them erupted. A deafening roar shook the ground as the masked figures returned. But they weren't alone this time. Shadows poured behind them, not human, not even physical, but alive. They moved like smoke, yet their eyes burned. Callahan fired. The bullets did nothing. The chamber doors slammed shut. They were trapped. Ethan turned back to the orb. His heartbeat pounded. He had seen this before. He had died here before. But not this time. Not this time. He clenched his fists, his voice steady. I remember now. Sophia and Callahan exchanged panicked glances. But before they could speak, the golden light rushed toward Ethan. It chose him, and the chamber collapsed into darkness. Lethan's mind was drowning in light. 1,000 voices, 1,000 lives. They whispered, screamed, begged. Memories not his own, but still familiar. He was floating, weightless, yet he could feel the ground shaking beneath him. A voice, ancient and commanding, shattered through the chaos. You must decide. Ethan gasped as reality snapped back into focus. The chamber was crumbling. The golden orb pulsed wildly in his hands, its warmth burning into his skin. Callahan was on his knees, gripping his chest, his breath ragged. Sophia stood beside him, tears streaking her face. The masked figures had stopped their advance, their forms flickering like shadows caught between two worlds. And then the darkness moved. It rose from the cracks in the floor, a writhing mass of smoke and fire, twisting into a shape that had no face, no form, only hunger. It had been trapped for centuries, sealed within this prison. And now, Ethan had set it free. Sophia screamed, Ethan, do something. The entity turned toward them, its voice a whisper sliding beneath their skin. This world does not belong to you. Ethan's grip tightened around the orb. His mind was still reeling with the visions, but now he understood. The orb was not just a key, it was a choice. Seal the entity again, or let it consume everything. His past self had been afraid. He had failed. He had chosen wrong. Not this time. Ethan took a step forward. The creature lunged. The orb exploded with light, blinding, burning, absolute. A shock wave ripped through the chamber. The walls disintegrated into golden dust. The masked figures vanished, their bodies dissolving as if they had never existed. The darkness screeched, twisting, fighting, but it was too late. The light swallowed everything. For a moment, there was nothing, and then silence. Ethan's body hit solid ground. He gasped, air filling his lungs. He was alive. He blinked. They were no longer underground. The chamber was gone. The tunnel was gone. They were standing on a vast, empty plain under a sky that wasn't the sky they knew. The stars above were unfamiliar, shifting, moving. The air smelled ancient, untouched by time. Callahan groaned beside him. Sophia's breath was shaky as she clutched Ethan's arm. "Where are we?" she whispered. Ethan didn't answer, because he already knew. They hadn't just sealed the darkness. They had crossed into another reality. And something was watching them from the horizon.